Hi, everyone. It's another day, it's another week, and it's a new beginning, new life. Every day brings us new life. So, welcome to the Unstoppable Life podcast with me, your host, Verna, and Michelle Hall, who is my guest again with a continuation from our last episode on healing through self love. It is so important for us to heal and for us to understand the importance of love because love transcends everything. When we have love, we can do almost anything because love conquers all. If you heard that before, love conquers all. So when we have love, there is three things: faith, hope, and love. Love is the greatest. So having self care, having self love, loving yourself is not a bad thing. It is something good because when you love yourself, you can love others. It says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. So if you're
Hmm.
not going to hate yourself, if you're not going to do bad thing to yourself, obviously, you're not going to do that to someone else once you have love. It's when you don't have love within you, that's when everything go haywire. So we are going to continue from where we left off in our last episode. So Michelle, do you want to take the floor?
Sure. Thank you for having me back on. We had such a good conversation last time, and I'm looking forward to continuing our discussion on self love. So, wherever you want to start, I am open to that.
Well, I'll let you start wherever you feel comfortable. I think it's important. We always try to keep this podcast authentic. And the questions that come up, we have nothing pre-planned, is what need to come out because it's important when we do these podcasts that what someone needs to hear, they would hear it. And it comes up in that moment for them. So it's just authentic. The questions just come up and then we just flow with that. So what did you have in mind that you wanted to share today with the audience?
Well, you hit on it in your opening and how important self love is. It is so important. And as I was coming up as a younger woman and internalizing all that I was holding on to myself, I had no idea that so many women did not love themselves well. And I really caution myself. I don't want to say that women don't love themselves because I don't want to offend anyone. And I'm sure we love ourselves the best that we know how. But oftentimes, the love and care that we have for ourselves is so surface and minimal. It's not deep. And I think oftentimes too, we just don't think about it. We just say, if I were to be out in a store or somewhere and ask, of course, they probably think I was crazy if I just walked up to them and asked them if they love themselves. But if you're in conversation with someone and you ask them, do you love yourself? The answer is going to probably be, of course I do. But when you start looking at the deeper components, when you look at self care, when you look at self esteem, and self compassion, all of those things, how do you really treat yourself? And we often put ourselves last. We as women often put ourselves last. We do for others, we do for our children, we do for our spouses, we do for our families and friends, for our job. And we are often the last one on the list. And by the time we get to ourselves, we're exhausted. We are tired. And sometimes we don't ever get to ourselves to be able to treat ourselves truly well. So I did not realize how widespread it was. And it's not just from, sexual trauma, which is what I experienced, but for a variety of things, and a lot of that starts in childhood because those are our very formative years. And a lot of that, a lot of our self image um, is created as children, and that is dependent upon what's going on in your home. It depends on the parents that raised you, your experiences, and all of those things. But oftentimes, what I have found is that we as women really just we often don't get that strong foundation of confidence and self-love. And I just did not realize how widespread it was. Have you seen that in your work?
Yeah, it's amazing because sometimes people will think that they're not worthy, especially as you said for women. I am not worthy of this. I know it for me as well, having gone through sexual trauma, but also the abandonment because I felt abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me.
Right.
And because I didn't do that, and because I couldn't speak about what was happening to me, because nobody wanted to listen,
Hmm.
it was a case of, well, where do I turn and how do you love yourself? And you
Right.
grew up with that, not knowing what to do because nobody has spoken to you about it. As I said in
Exactly.
my last episode, my great grandaunt, she was the one that taught me about being strong and courageous. But just when I was about to learn a lot more from her, I was taken from her, and
Hmm.
nobody filled that gap.
Hmm.
So, yes, there is a lot of women who feel that way. And it's about being able to speak out. Because when you're younger, it's like, oh, you should be seen and not be heard. So, what do?
Exactly.
You keep
You zip it
silent.
up. Hmm.
You understand? You keep
So true.
silent. And you suffer in that silence. And I think that
Yes.
silence is like a death sentence, in my
Yes.
view. I don't
Yes.
know. What do you think?
Yes. It's very important. We did touch on that last time, and that's what I said happened with me when I was growing up, is that you are to be seen and not heard. And it was like children just didn't have a voice. And so with that, I agree. Where do you turn? You have nowhere to go but inside. When the voice of children are not valued, and I don't know that it was an intentional thing that parents did. I certainly don't think it was intentional on my mother's part. That's just how it was. Children listened to their parents. They didn't talk back, and they didn't have an opinion. You existed, and there was no voice. And I just don't think it was intentional. And it was very interesting when I was raising my son, because I felt like I was silenced as a kid, just out of, the time that it was, and that's how things were. I always held an open place for my son. He could always talk to me. I would talk to him. You know, he could always come to me about anything. And I made that perfectly clear to him. And my husband at the time didn't understand that. He was like, "Why do you talk to him so much?" I'm like, "What?" Because that's how he was raised too. It's like that was not the type of relationship that you had with your children. And that was not what I wanted for him. I didn't want him to feel like he didn't have a voice, like he couldn't come to me or to his father and ask us things. And so it was just that important to me, just based on my experience, to have that openness. And even now, he's a young man, and he still calls me, and we'll talk, or that dialogue is still open. And it was so important to me, even though, I mean, he's a male, but that's important for men and women,
Yeah.
because we have a lot of men who are silenced, or who don't get the opportunity to express or learn how to express their emotions in childhood, because they're often taught boys don't cry, boys have to be strong, boys don't do this, boys don't do that. But we're all people, and we all have emotions, and we all need to be able to express those things well, because if not, that stuff is pent up, and it comes out in one way or the other. And so it's important to have that voice. But when you don't, it does feel somewhat like a death sentence, because it's like you have nowhere to go. You
Yeah.
have nowhere to go.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I love the fact that you said you have this conversation from very young when you had your son, that
Hmm.
you have this dialogue, that you had conversations. Because for me as well, I always told myself if I had children, I was going to do the same because
Hmm.
I didn't have that relationship with my mom because I didn't grow up with her. I
Hmm.
only started living with her when my great aunt, when I had ran away from my grandmother and ran back to my great aunt when I was about 12.
Hmm.
And that's a young lady, and she was like in her 90s now, and she was like, I can't look after a young lady. There will be things that you need to learn, and your mom need to teach you those things. And so she
Yes.
made sure I was able to, my mom was able she was able to send me to my mom who was in another country. And so I wanted to be able to have that relationship with my mom. But remember, I didn't grow up with her.
Right.
So there was no conversation between us. There was nothing. It was just do this. You just had to do what she said because you were
Hmm.
in her house. And you do, as I say, as long as you are in my house.
Yep.
No
Yep.
if,
And
no
that's how
buts.
it is. And that's how it was with my mother. I mean, I did grow up with her. Um, but the dialogue was not open like that. And like I say, I don't know that it was intentional, that she knew the effect that it was having on, I can't speak for anyone else, but having on me. But it was just not the norm to have those
Mhm.
types of conversations and to be open and to listen to my doggy is back here if you see him on camera.
Yeah.
um it was just not the norm to have those types of open conversations and discussions. And I just felt it was so important um to have that openness with my son. And my sisters are the same way with their kids. They're very close. They talk to their kids, and it's been open like that from birth, from the time they had kids. And
Yeah.
I think it makes such a I think it makes a difference. It creates that closeness.
Mhm.
um it creates a connection, it creates that bond, it gives you safety.
Mhm.
When you can go and share something with a parent and not feel judged and or chastised for it or whatever, it creates that safe space. And that's
Yeah,
so important, especially for children,
yeah,
especially for children.
especially because I think that's where the role model comes in, the parent being the role model and not
Hmm.
somebody else on the outside. I'm not saying they can see something that's happening on the outside and then say, oh, I'd like to take a bit of that because you can take something from someone and you can
Right.
learn from someone. So I haven't had two miscarriages. I didn't have the opportunity to pass that on to my children. I
Hmm.
remember one day I was going to work and they were playing music in the bus I was traveling, and it was so loud and so early in the morning. I just said, you know what? Next stop, take me. I want to get off. And one of the gentlemen said, oh my gosh, if you had children, I can't imagine what your children would be going through. I mean, we would have had that relationship, but they wouldn't be playing 6 o'clock in the morning, boom, 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 boom.
Yes. Well, because you still have to be parent. You still have to be parent. And I think a lot of times, um, even now, people have a difficult time being parent and being friend
Yeah,
with their children. I don't think there's anything wrong with having openness with your children, but you're parent first.
yeah,
And we are charged with the responsibility of raising our children and teaching them and guiding them. And in that process, in that parenting process, you can have that as a part of the process, but you're still parent. You're still parent.
exactly, exactly. That is such a power, and that is not about not loving. It's about
Right.
showing that love, and it's about loving that self love. It's still about self. It's still about loving self, but showing them how to love themselves in the process
Right.
of the exchange of what is happening. Because,
Yes.
as you said, is giving them the tools that they need when they grow up, how they themselves are going to not only um, relate to their own children, but also how would you relate with people outside of the family? You
Yes.
understand? When do you set boundaries? Because in self love, you have to set boundaries. So how did you go about setting those boundaries?
Ooh, boundaries are so important. You know, I when I was married, um, I had a very difficult relationship with my in-laws, and they caused me a lot of heartache. And probably one of the first hard boundaries that I set was cutting off my relationship with them because they were very toxic and they were very passive aggressive in how they did things, meaning they would, talk to me and be friendly in my face, but then behind the scenes they were trying to sabotage my marriage. And I got to a point where I was just like, I am just so done with this. I had spent probably half the marriage, maybe close to 15 years, trying to make things work well with them because they were my husband's parents. And you don't just marry a person, you marry
The
the
family.
family. And I wanted it to work. During that time I was very much a people pleaser, and I wanted things to be well, I wanted things to flow, I wanted everybody to get along. But I just came to learn that there are some people that will never be happy with you. They will never really like you for who you are. And I learned that it was not my problem, it was her problem. And that I was no longer going to be burdened with that. I was no longer going to be mistreated. And really, it was just a decision that I didn't want to be mistreated by them in anymore. So I think a lot of it. Now I was a little older. I was probably in my late 30s by then. So I had already had some life. I had already been living a little bit, and I was getting older. And I was just done. I was just done. And I think you've probably heard the term, when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, then that's when you make a change.
Yeah.
And there was a particular incident that took me there. And I just really came to the decision that I don't deserve this treatment. And that was about self-worth. Me recognizing that I am worth a better relationship. I am worth being treated better for having been the spouse to your son and a good spouse to your son for all of these years, and being the mother to your first grandchild. Why are you mistreating me? I've done nothing wrong. I've done nothing to hurt you. I've done nothing to cause you to treat me this way.
Mm.
And it was really just a realization. It was really just a realization that I was worth more than what she was giving me. And I made the decision to just cut off. I just stopped talking to them. I stopped dealing with them. I stopped going to their home. Um, and I put that boundary in place for myself because I felt that I was worth it. So I think that's important when boundaries need to be set. You have to know that you're worthy of this, regardless of what whoever may be affected thinks about it. It's about you and your well-being and what you think is best for you. So, it's a decision about what's best for you. It's a decision about your worthiness. and what you feel you deserve as a person. And I think that's where boundaries come from. It comes out of your worth for yourself. And that
Yeah.
was one of the ones that I set based on that. I felt like I was not deserving of that treatment. And so I set that boundary.
That's so important. And I'm glad you said that because I knew growing up I had to, and even as an adult, you had to, it's all about, again, bringing it back to self love. So when you understand your self worth, you understand, listen, I deserve best. I
Mm-hmm.
deserve more. I am worth it. And that's the goodness about being able to recognize. And you recognize after trying for so many years, I've done all I can.
Right.
I could do no more.
Right.
And you always know when the time is right. You always
Absolutely.
know when the time is right. I heard my previous husband just before we got married. We went to visit his mom because she lived in another island. So we went to visit. And the way I heard he was speaking to her, I was like appalled. I was like, you have to show some respect, you know, to your mom. So I interject and I said, that's no way to speak to your mother. Because if you can speak to your mother like that, I can just imagine what you will do to me.
Exactly.
And the mom then said, oh no, that's how we talk to one another. And I was like, huh? So,
Mm,
you know, that brings me in terms of when we're talking about self-love, and now we have that self-worth. When the red flag shows up, how did you, I know this red flag showed up, but it took you years to be able to
yes.
make that decision because
Yes.
now you had life experience. Because when you got married, it was at age 21, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly, it was
Yes.
age 21. So you didn't have any much life experience. But
Right.
now, being in your 30s, you have had some life experience. So
Hmm.
what changes would you have made? I know we touched on one thing which you spoke about, where he refused to get married on that day, and you still went ahead.
Hmm.
But had you because you were young and in
Yes.
love, you young and
Yes.
in love, not thinking
Yes.
about yourself, but thinking,
Yes.
oh God, I want this man because you want that love.
Hmm.
But now, seeing that you had gone through all of that, when that red flag showed up, if you were to able to speak to that Michelle, then what would you say to
Mm.
her? What would you say?
Ooh, I would probably say run. Run because I didn't know myself. That 21-year-old that was left on her wedding day and utterly devastated, then turn around and marry this person 2 days later. Those were more than red flags. Those were like, I don't know what you call them. It's like SOS. But I say that, and I don't want anyone to think that my ex-husband was a terrible person. Yeah, I know being left at the altar is a bad thing. He was also young. He was 21 as well, and I think honestly he got cold feet, and the mother had something to do with that as well. So there was a lot in play. There was a lot in play during that time. But honestly, I would not encourage a daughter of mine to do that. I would I would tell myself, and if I had a daughter where that happened, that this is not this is not the person for you. If they can get you to this point and walk away, this is not what you want to do right now. Even if it worked out later, it would need to be more than 2 days later. You would need some time to work through that, to determine if it is something that is indeed something that you both want to do. And was it just a case of cold feet, or was it something else going on? Um, but yeah, I would probably look, I would definitely say, yeah, you don't need to do that at this point. You don't need to do that. You need to take some time. You need to look at what happened, why it happened, and figure out what your next step is. But I definitely would not encourage anyone to move forward in a marriage after something of that nature happens in just 2 days.
Yeah, because that's a big commitment.
It is.
It is a
It
big
it
commitment.
it is. And like I said, from the beginning, my in-laws were involved. And so from the beginning till the time that I cut them off, um, there were things going on there. And there was nitpicking, and there was this and there was that. And I had far more trauma from them than I ever had from my husband. They were the ones who were working in the background
Mhm.
and causing problems and doing things. And but yeah, it was, I was not healthy. I was not emotionally healthy, but you don't know that. You don't know what you don't know. And no one told me any different. No one told me, don't marry him, don't do this, don't do. Now of course it was only a couple days later, so there really wasn't much time for anybody to tell me anything. And honestly, I don't know if I would have listened
Listened.
at that
Mhm.
time, because you think, and you're in love, and when you're wanting love, like I said, I had the father wound, and I just really wanted to be loved. And he did not mistreat me. He treated me well prior, as we dated and courted. um it was just a series of events. I think I'm gonna write a book about it, because it's there's lots of layers to it, to be honest. um but it wasn't like he was mistreating me prior to. We actually saw each other the day prior, and all plans were still go. And it was just that morning that he showed up, and that was largely in part to his mother, but he was a grown man at that time as well, so he has
Yeah,
he has the responsibility himself.
yeah,
So, but it was just a lot. But I would not recommend anyone to do that. I would certainly recommend that you take time and figure out what is really going on, and not just hop into it.
yeah. I'm so glad you said that because mine is a little bit similar. After I recognized how he spoke to his mom and she interjected and said, "That's how we talk," I
Mm-hmm.
thought, no, that's not how you talk. A son
Yeah.
will talk to his mom. No way. And then I noticed even before our marriage, because he was moving into my apartment,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to help a friend who was getting married. And I said to her, "Don't buy a wedding dress. I have one. You're a bit taller. We could let down the hem, whatever we need to do, so it fits you. So you don't need to buy anything. So you can borrow my dress." And then they didn't have a lot of money. So I said, "We could make the church, we could come together, and we could make stuff, and we could have a really wonderful time." And so I'm going to help her. And bearing in mind is my apartment. He had on one of my t-shirts, ran after me in the middle of the road, grabbed my key, hit me, and tell me don't come back.
Oh, wow.
That's before we got married.
That was before you got married.
Before we got married.
So,
And
so I ask you a question. Why did you go forward?
why did I go forward? I have no idea. But I, I think I was a worship leader. I was in hospitality. I was in the choir. And everybody else were like getting married, having children, and you're like, thinking, uh, I'm not about to change it, but as Christians, we probably can mend these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the night before the wedding, he hit me. He was, friends were helping come across to help with certain things. And he decided to stay there with my auntie and I. And he hit me again. This time it was worse. And I was like, I'm not getting married. No, 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 no. I'm not getting married tomorrow. This is it. So I didn't go to the hairdresser. I didn't get my nails done. I didn't even get my dress smoothed, nothing. I told my auntie, I was like lying at the feet of my aunt like a fetus because
Mm-hmm.
my auntie heard the commotion and she came out and she said, "You're not getting married tomorrow." And I said, "No." And the next day she sat me down and said, "No, forget about what happened yesterday. He's jealous because we are spending, because I've never met my auntie. My aunt and my mom were twins, identical
Mm.
twins. And
Okay.
my mom disappeared, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
She went missing. So I've never seen her. The last time I saw her was September 1983. That was the
Mm-hmm.
last time I saw my mom. So my auntie came from England to represent, to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I see her, it's like I'm seeing my mother all over again.
Wow.
And so she sat me down and she said, "He's just jealous that we have been spending lots of time together. He doesn't mean that. So, everything is already planned. Everything is a military wedding. Don't do it. Don't not go to the to church. Don't do it." I didn't do it. I didn't go to the church. I didn't do anything. So I went over and I got dressed and I was about half an hour late. And in that process, I think my auntie told my uncle, because my uncle was giving me away, he was my best friend. And when the time came and they said, "Who take this? Do you take this man to be your love-wedded husband?" I couldn't answer. I just stood there because they had asked my uncle, "Who do you give this woman to?"
Mm-hmm.
And my uncle looked and said, "I don't know."
Mm.
He said, "Who
Wow.
do you?" He said, "I don't know. I don't know who it is." And I asked again, and my uncle said, "I do not know this guy. I don't know who he is." And I'm like, "Okay." So even then, I had the opportunity to say no and walk away,
Mm-hmm.
and I still went through with it.
Mm-hmm.
And all about because self worth, not knowing your worth, not knowing that you're worth more than this, not knowing that you deserve more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's not love. That's not love. That's infatuation. You just want to do something because everybody else is doing it, and you want to be in a group, and you want to be in the club, and you want to everybody to like you.
Yes. Yeah.
After the marriage, there's nobody there with you. It's just you.
That's true. So true.
So I guess what we are saying in this episode is that take time to listen, take time to see everything, take time to look, because everything is before you and
Mm-hmm.
everything is within you. So similarly to you, red flags were there, but I
Yes.
paid no attention to the red flags. And I guess I didn't know what the red flags was because I didn't have anybody to tell me these things. And,
Right.
I didn't have
Right.
anybody to tell. My mom never spoke to me about relationships. I couldn't have that conversation with her.
Right.
And
Right.
as you said before, most of the things were, I don't think that they willfully wanted to do that, but it was just how they grew up.
Right.
And how they grew up, they just passed that on, is what they saw happen,
Right.
and as I come to the realization that my mom had her own trauma that she went through
Mm-hmm.
that she never spoke about.
Right.
And she never opened up to me.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I couldn't hug my mom.
Mm.
I couldn't hug her. I couldn't say, I love you, mom,
Mm-hmm.
because there was no response. She said to me one day, a kiss betrayed Christ. I was about 15 years old,
Wow.
going on 16, when she said to me, a kiss betrayed Christ. So what do you do after that?
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. That's a
That's
powerful
heavy.
statement.
How do you
Very
expect a 15-year-old
to
to
be able to even
calculate that?
process that. Right. You're right. Wow. Well, and that's why, I think it's important as women. I know you work with women and men. I work with women. I think that's why it is so important that we take the time to do the work. And like I said, it doesn't even have to be a result of sexual trauma. It could just be something like you explained. I mean, if you grew up in a household that was cold and where love was not really shown or displayed, there may not have been any physical trauma or any sexual trauma of that sort, but that has an effect on your self-esteem and your self-worth as well. And that is one of the biggest things that I think women suffer with, is not feeling worthy and feeling unlovable because of what they experienced or didn't experience. And so I think it's important for women to take the time and just look at what you have going on in your life. How are you living? What are you accepting that's not serving you well? Because a lot of times we do go along to be in a club or to be in a clique or to make people think this, have people think what you want them to think about you, that all is well. And we put on these masks and we pretend sometimes that things are indeed what they are not, because we don't want people to know what's really inside. And so I think it's really important for women to take the time at any point in your life to just take the time and look at your life, look at yourself, look at your life, and see if there's places where you need to set boundaries or where you need to make changes. Have you been accepting things just to get along, or just to keep the peace? Um, you know, I was a peacekeeper. I wanted to keep people happy. I wanted everything to be smooth, you know. But peacekeeping is not from a place of strength. Peacemaking is where we need to be. And that is from a place of strength. And
Yeah.
so look and see if you're just keeping the peace, if you're going along just to get along, or if there's things that you really don't like about your life or how you're living or how people are treating you, that you want to make changes to. You get to choose. You get to choose. And so I just think it's so important, for women to do that. And you can do that at different times of your life, because as we get older and we get more life experience, we learn more, we experience different things. We don't know what each phase of life is until we get there and experience it. And every day that I live, every month, every year, as I'm getting older, going through different things in life, it's always a discovery. I'm constantly learning about myself. And how do I handle this? Oh, well, I didn't know, it was going to be like this. And it's so you're constantly evolving, you're constantly learning, you're constantly growing, or at least I hope we are constantly growing and learning about ourselves. So there's always things to discover about ourselves, to learn about ourselves, and you get the right to choose and to make changes in your life where you think change need to be made based on your worth and your value, and not what other people say and think about you.
That is so, so true. It's so, so true. It's understanding. And as you said, life It's a self-discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Life is a self-discovery because we're discovering things every day,
Yes.
every minute of the day. The only
Mm-hmm.
thing that doesn't change is, God change it not.
Yep.
But everything else change. A storm blow, it might be a heavy storm, it might be a light storm.
Right.
But we go through all of that and we have to accept that there are changes, and we have to make those changes, because
Yes.
if we don't make those changes, it can be devastating.
Yes.
Devastating on your physical health, physical, mental, emotional,
Mm-hmm.
social, and spiritual.
Yes.
And all that interconnectedness is what makes you a whole. It's
Mm-hmm.
what makes you realize how worthy you are,
Right.
how important it is to love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yep.
in loving yourself, you then can love others. Because as you mentioned before, we don't have an understanding of self love and self worth. We just want to be loved.
Right.
But until we understand what that word means, and then we add ourselves to that, this is about me loving me. Not that I don't care about anybody else, not that I don't love anybody else, but in order for me to love someone, I have got to love me.
And think about it this way. If we are primarily looking to be loved, that requires someone else,
Yeah,
right? That requires someone outside of you to love you. And if that person leaves and you don't have love for yourself, then where are you? I just think it's important to have that foundation
yeah,
so that you're not so dependent on the love of someone else, because people can take advantage of that, and they can use that to control or to manipulate you. Not always, of course, but it does happen. And if you don't have that solid sense of self and self-love in place, it's much easier to fall victim to that, because you want to keep people around, you want people to love you, you want people to show you love, and you're willing to accept uh things that are not the best for you to keep people around. I,
yeah,
I I solidly believe if you have that foundation of self-love, that you show up differently in the world. You
yeah.
show up differently, and you show up from a place of strength and a place of power.
A place of strength, a place of power, and a place of being able to speak, a voice.
Voice is so important. Yes.
So you have a voice,
Yes.
you can speak,
Yes.
you can
Absolutely.
you can be yourself and not be afraid of anything. I mean, when we look at self-love, it is such a powerful thing, and I do feel that you should write a book on it, and I do feel that I should put it in my book as well, because it's such a big topic. There's just so much nuance to it. It's not just something we say, but it's
Right.
something you live.
Mm-hmm.
It's something you have to put into your daily plan of living. Life happens.
Mm-hmm.
And when life happens, you have to be able to adapt.
Yes.
You have to be able to adapt. It's like a caterpillar changing into a butterfly.
Mm-hmm.
Metamorphosis. I could never
Yes.
say that word properly. Yeah. So you have to change, because every time you change, you get stronger, not
Mm-hmm.
weaker. You get bolder,
Mm-hmm.
you get braver,
Absolutely.
and you become more powerful,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yep.
you can stand in your power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it
So
requires
with
work. It requires work. You have to do the work
Yes,
to get there.
yeah,
Is some people may be inherently strong with their self-love. But for most people, I think for most women, it requires some level of work. And like I say, it's a decision as well.
yeah.
And once you're able to do that and you know what your core values are, you already know how you're going to live. You already know how you're going to, how you're going to show up. What type of places are you going to, what's acceptable to you, it I think it just creates a sense of, this is who I am. This is what's important to me. This is what I stand for. This is how I'm going to live. And
Yeah.
so whenever changes come, then you already got that foundation, and it's easier to be able to pivot and to deal with things because you already got your foundation laid.
Amen. I had to say amen to that.
Amen. Amen. I agree. It's just so important.
Uh,
I just think it's vitally important.
yes,
Vitally.
it is. It is. It is. Another, here you go, guys. Another powerful session on
Yes.
healing through self-love. But if you notice, we touched on many different topics within
Yes.
this portion of self-love. And that's to the extent that self-love goes.
Yes.
So I hope that as you listen to the first episode and you listen to this episode, that you will gather some things from it that will help you, that will help to propel you into a place of seeking help, if you need that, or you need in some form of coaching or mentorship. That's something you need, you desire, because we all need that. We all need to learn from someone. We all need somebody to hold our hands. It's not that we are children, but we all need that coming together with someone else. We all need community. We
Yes.
were not meant to do everything on our own. We were
Hmm.
meant to be in a community, and being in a community, you'll hear different voices, you will learn different things that would help you to become that strong, powerful woman that you ought to be. Or if it's a man listening, that you will become that strong, powerful man that you were designed to be,
Hmm.
because you have a voice. And loving yourself does not mean that you are selfish. Having that self love does not mean selfishness. That's not
Right.
what it means. It means taking care of you, taking care of your physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual well being.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah? So, is
Yeah.
there anything else, Michelle, you would like to say at this juncture as we come to an end?
Oh, it's been such a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate you having me on to continue from our first session. I just, like I say, I've said it before, I just want women to realize that they have the power to decide what is in their best interest. And if anyone's out there listening that needs help on their self-love journey, I am a coach that offers self-love training, and so does you. I think you offer various trainings as well. Whatever you need, reach out and get the help, whether it's through me, whether it's through Verna or someone else. There are resources out there that can help you with this process, and just reach out and get help. There's no shame in getting help to move you through this process. Of course, it can be done. You can do it on your own, but it may take a lot longer. Sometimes it is good to have that guide to guide you along and to help you through the process. Get the help that you need to get to the self-love that you deserve so that you can move forward in strength and power and that you can have the voice that you need to live the life that God has for you.
Yeah, that's so, so true. As you said, I work on building resilience and empowering you because resilience is something you have to build. It's like building muscles. So, and resilience come in many forms. It's like you have an athlete. They build resilience to be able um, to do that flip or to do that high jump or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
And they get that empowerment from their coaches that can see how far they can go and just guide them. But as Michelle said, it takes work. And yes, you can do it on your own, and it will take a bit longer. Like I did it on my own, and it took me how many years? But in that process, I learned a lot. But now, because there was nobody there to do that, I couldn't go and say, "Well, I'm going to a counselor or something like that," because then it's like the answer would be no. What's wrong with you? Are you mad? that that will be the sentiment. So you keep quiet. So don't stay in silence. Reach out. Reach out. We are here if you want to speak to any one of us. Um, and as Michelle said, there are other people out there. There are other resources out there. But it's good to have somebody that you can, who have been through it and can speak from it from an authentic place and a place of knowing and can help you to give you the guidance that you need. So thank you for listening to us. We look forward to hearing from you. So don't hesitate to write to us. Michelle, um, details will be in the show notes, and you will see my details as well, so that you can reach out and you can touch. So again, thank you for listening to the Unstoppable Life podcast, where we bring women and men together because we were meant to be together. We were meant to walk together. We were meant to listen and have conversation together. And that's the whole remit of what I do. It's in terms of, yes, I was abused by, I wouldn't just say abused by men mostly, but also when you think about the relationship I had with my mom, it was not there. So that was abandonment. So you're thinking of abandonment. So whichever way you want to go, there is scope and there is room for it. So thank you once again. Like and share this podcast. Follow us on our social media platforms. And we look forward to seeing with you and sitting with you at some point in your life. So take care and God bless. Speak to you soon. Bye.